Restokim Grosseria. Nidius Entertainment. Wah, pakai fitur lifestyle di BCA Mobile. Semua bisa terkabul, mantul. Makanya buka tabungan dulu di BCA Mobile.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's talk about Web 3.0 and why it matters. Is that too loud? No, it's good. I'm not familiar with each of your backgrounds, so I tried to keep the presentation as broad as possible so it can appeal to both technical but also more general backgrounds. But I'm curious, a quick show of hands in the audience, how many of you consider yourselves to have more technical engineering or developer backgrounds? All right, so perfect. Let's dig in. What I'm planning to cover today with respect to Web 3.0 is first and foremost, what is the technology that powers Web 3.0? What are the challenges that Web 3.0 still faces? What are the attributes of Web 3 that make it so unique and well-positioned to power our digital lives going forward? And then we can wrap up with a few ideas on how each and every one of you can get involved in the Web 3 movement. So by way of background, prior to Web 3 and blockchain, I spent 12 years of my career in financial services, big data, and tech. I did my undergrad in computer science and engineering from IIT, the Indian Institute of Technology, and then a master's at Dartmouth in engineering, followed by an MBA at Wharton UPenn. I started my career at the Boston Consulting Group, BCG, focused on financial services clients in Boston and New York. And after that, I worked at Condé Nast as a director of digital product strategy. For those of you who don't know Condé Nast, they own Wired, Reddit, New Yorker, and a number of other publications. Thereafter, I was a director at BlackRock. It's the biggest asset manager in the world in New York, and also worked at a big data company that got acquired by MasterCard. However, for the last 6 to 7 years, I have been immersed in Web3 and blockchain and have been a huge proponent of the future of the internet. I started my career with Joe Lubin at Consensus in Brooklyn, where I was his executive director of special projects, and I launched the Consensus's dev program to certify developers on Solidity. Then I was at Kraken, which is one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world, leading BizOps, and I founded, along with 2 other partners, Kraken Ventures, which is a venture fund investing in both fintech and Web3. Currently, I'm in the process of setting up an investment management company focused entirely on Web3 startups. All right, so in order to understand what Web3's power is, it's important to know what blockchain technology is because that's the underlying layer that Web3 is being built on. The word blockchain quite literally means a chain of blocks. So this is a very simple sequence of events for what happens on the blockchain when a user initiates a transaction. Now, this transaction can be anything from a monetary withdrawal to publishing a work of art or music on the blockchain. Step 1, as the user executes on the blockchain, That transaction gets transmitted to a peer-to-peer network of computers that are called nodes. The third step here is the most unique aspect of this technology, which is a miner picks up the transaction, a miner is essentially a node or a computer, and they are able to verify that this transaction is accurate and should be validated and executed in an entirely distributed and decentralized fashion. Once they do that using specific consensus algorithms, and these consensus algorithms differ by different kinds of blockchains. So you have proof of stake blockchains and proof of work blockchains. Once they validate the transaction is accurate and should be executed, they broadcast that block back to this distributed computer network, and the block gets added to the blockchain. A few things to note here are that a singular chain in the blockchain with a sequence of blocks is entirely unique. It cannot be replicated, it cannot be forged, it cannot be faked. So it's immutable. All right, so what is Web3? Web3 for me is the future of the internet as we know it, built on blockchain technology, but also leveraging inherent native tokens that a blockchain uses, which are called cryptocurrencies, to exchange value in a distributed fashion. Web 3.0 also uses NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, in order to create the next generation of the internet. There are 4 unique aspects of Web 3-based internet that currently do not exist in Web 2/Web 1 internet as we know it. One of them is that Web 3 is truly open and decentralized. Not only is the code intended to be open sourced, but the users and developers that interact with Web 3 are the ones that own that network. The second piece here is it's permissionless. Anyone can participate in Web 3 without requiring a centralized authority to approve interactions with Web 3. The native payments we already talked about. These are native tokens that are used to exchange value in a world built on the blockchain. The 2 most common native currencies that you might have heard of are obviously Bitcoin and Ethereum. Bitcoin is the native cryptocurrency of the Bitcoin blockchain, and then Ethereum, or ETH, is the native currency of the Ethereum blockchain. Lastly, Web 3.0 is trustless. So as we just talked about in the example of a transaction that is executed on the blockchain, a distributed and decentralized system of computers or nodes is the one that's approving the transaction as being correct. And the way it's ensuring that this transaction is correct and should happen is entirely executed based on incentive mechanisms and economic incentives in the blockchain. All right, so let's compare Web 3 versus Web 2 versus Web 1. Web 1, and this existed in the early 90s through the 2000s, was primarily an information-based internet. Pretty much read-only, one-directional. You had the Netscapes, AOLs, et cetera, where people were consuming information one way. Web 2 is the internet as we know of it today. It's what existed from 2000s to 2020s and continues to exist. It's the platform economy. You are able to read and write to the internet and interact with it as a user. However, it's still dominated by a few platforms that are operating in silos and are extremely centralized, whether that's Facebook or Google or Twitter, et cetera. Web 3 is the next generation of the internet, which is the ownership economy. In this world, not only can you read and write to the internet, but you can own not just the platform itself, but you own all of the content on it. As a user, you own your identity. You can own all of the data that currently is being tracked by these platforms in Web 2 using eyeball tracking, et cetera. In Web 3, you own that data and you decide who gets to see it and for what purpose and what you get in return. So Web 3 is extremely decentralized, distributed, it's censorless, and it's owned by the users. What does this mean in terms of value creation between Web 1 versus Web 2 and Web 3? So on the y-axis here, you have value created by log scale, and on the x-axis is time. Web 1 contributed roughly $1 trillion in value created in terms of the economy. Web 2, which was roughly from 2004 and currently exists in existence, is expected to triple the value that it created by 2030, going from about 6 trillion to about 20 trillion. Web 3.0, from a timeline perspective, really came about in 2014 when the Ethereum blockchain allowed smart contracts to be executed and designed. So Web 3.0 really existed from 2014 to well into the future. And that's where we are really going to see exponential value creation. And I think it's not easy to look at here, but it's obviously a TBD. We expect entirely new business paradigms to be created in Web 3 that currently don't exist. I do want to point out that the terms Web 3, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain are often used synonymously, but Web 3, in my mind, is the future of the internet. It's built on blockchain technology, and then one feature of blockchain technology is the native token that you use on it, and that's the cryptocurrencies. All right, so I promise, so some of the visuals on this are a little messed up, but I promise these are the only 2 technical slides in the entire presentation. But I did want to highlight that the Web3 tech stack is being built at every layer in order to support the philosophies and the unique needs of Web3. So at the bottom, you have the protocol layer. This is what the underlying blockchain is that the web is being built on. So these are things like, so this is what we call layer 1s or L1s in the world of Web3. And this can be Ethereum, Bitcoin, Algorand, Solana, Near, etc. Several of them are Ethereum virtual machine compatible, so EVM compatible, and several are not. Then on top of that, you have the infrastructure layer. This is the layer that provides all of the functionality for an internet in Web3 to work. So this is things like storage, network, computation. It is similar to what you would think of as IPFS in the traditional Web3 world. On top of that, you have the consumer layer, which we are calling the application layer in the traditional tech stack. This is where users are interacting with applications to get utility out of it. So it could be decentralized financial applications, or it could be publishing their work of art or music as an NFT, etc. And then what is quite unique to Web3 is the access layer. This is where you have wallets like MetaMask, Phantom, etc. You have aggregators and domain name generators. But this is where users truly control their access to Web3, or how they enter the internet of the future, what they share for information, how they take ownership, and how they even inform the governance and the rules of operating within that internet. I'll go through this slide very quickly, but everything that exists in Web 2 from a tech stack is essentially, as we speak, being rebuilt for the Web 3 internet of the future. There are 2 reasons why this needs to be rebuilt. First, most of the solutions in Web 2 need to be rebuilt in order to align with the ethos of Web 3, which is decentralized. However, from a tech perspective as well, if you think about data aggregation or data mining across various wallets or nodes on the internet of the future, or data transmission, all of that from a technical perspective is quite unique in Web 3 and different than the way it operates in Web 2. So for example, in Web 2, for data storage, you could have Amazon Web Services, Dropbox, but in Web 3, Filecoin, Arweave, etc. are providing that same service. Similarly, in the Web 2 world, in order for you to set up a website, you have to use GoDaddy, ICON, etc., which are centralized repositories that are providing this service. We already have an alternative to those services in Web 3. Those are things like ENS, so the Ethereum naming service, or unstoppable domains that are doing it in an extremely decentralized fashion native to Web 3. Even things like hiring and talent, for example, Upwork, that is probably the best example that is decentralized in the Web 2 world, is a model that's been turned over on its head by Brain Trust that provides talent and hiring in the Web 3 worlds in a decentralized fashion. So why does any of this matter? What is Web3 going to accomplish that is going to touch our lives on a daily basis? From my perspective, the short answer is Web3 has wide-ranging applications that go across multiple segments, whether it's social media, gaming, metaverse, DAOs, DeFi, etc. We are very much in the first innings of Web3, where a lot of media, activity, etc. so far has been focused on the currencies. It's been focused on trading. It's been focused a lot on speculation. And that's what led to the DeFi summer, the Decentralized Finance Summer, as well as the NFT movement. A lot of activity in the NFT space as well over the last couple of years has been pretty much focused on speculation. However, going forward, I think the real value of Web3 will be to rethink some of the fundamental digital activity that we have on a daily basis today on Web 2. So for example, a social media where content creators are rewarded for the content that they're creating, but consumers can also rate the content that they're consuming. Similarly, the metaverse, which is a virtual world, a 3D version of the internet, is going to become much more integrated with the real physical world, particularly as artificial intelligence and machine learning really ramp up and reach maturity. So for a lot of the marketing folks out there, at the very least, I would say that in the future, there's going to be, you would have to rewire and rethink how marketing works in the metaverse. On the one hand, users have a lot of control in terms of what they are consuming as marketing, but on the other hand, targeting from a marketing perspective becomes extremely easy. And then I do want to highlight DAOs. DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations. Very experimental at this point. There is a lot to be figured out here, but they are fundamentally redesigning how an organization or a community should come together and be incentivized to work towards a common goal. So when is this Web3 transformation going to happen? A lot of people feel like we've been in this experimentation mode for a long, long time. Let's take a look at the timeline for Web3. Web3's inception, from a theoretical sense, happened in 2008 when Satoshi published the Bitcoin white paper. From 2008-9 to 2015, when Ethereum came about, there was really just one blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain. There was only one cryptocurrency or token called Bitcoin. The transactions per second, the throughput, the ability for this system to handle a volume of transactions was extremely low. It was just 5 transactions per second. There was no smart contract capability. Ethereum happened 2014, 2015. It enabled smart contract capability. It literally allowed other blockchains, other L1s to be engineered. So we started looking at Solana, started looking at Algorand, etc. The transactions per second improved slightly. We are now marching towards 2025. By the end of 2025, transactions per second will start reaching the level that you require for something like a Visa or MasterCard in terms of the throughput as well as the speed. In addition, a lot of work is going on in the Web3 space to allow all of these different blockchains to interoperate and interact with each other, which is going to be extremely important. And then the DeFi summer has allowed us to experiment with the finance primitives and look at what a system would work, how it would work with respect to the native tokens and finance primitives. From 2025 to 2030, I expect that a lot of innovation in Web3 will come from taking Web2 business models and replicating them in Web3. Now that in itself could be a huge improvement with respect to speed, transaction costs, etc. I mean, take a look at the example of remittances. Remittances already, because of blockchain and crypto, it's an industry that's been transformed in terms of the cost as well as the settlement times. However, the real magic is going to happen post-2030 when entire paradigms will be rethought. So one example of this is a company called Superfluid. What it does is it takes payments and makes them entirely continuous payments. So if you could get paid real time for every iota of work that was done or KPIs or OKRs or whatever accomplished, that world, from the point of view of a business model, would look extremely different in the financial services world, in other industries, et cetera. And we are not there yet, but that's what blockchain and Web 3.0 is powering. All right, so let's put this in perspective. So here on the y-axis, you have millions of internet users. And on the x-axis, you have time. The gray line is the internet as we know it today. A lot of us forget this, but the internet as we know it today has been developing and in existence for 30 years. From the 90s, 2000s, and now we're in mid-2020s. That's 30 plus years. It took the internet as we know it 30 plus years to get to 5 billion users, which is only about 60% penetration globally. Let's look at what happened with Web3. The yellow dot here is MetaMask. MetaMask is one of the primary wallets that people use to enter Web3 currently. It had 5 million monthly active users in 2021, and by the next year, in 1 year, that had doubled to 10 million active users. If we look at early adopters, and I think Onli talked about this earlier in terms of the tech curve, the bell curve, the early adopter line has been crossed at this point with respect to crypto usage. 250 to 300 million users globally have transacted with crypto. I will say that, however, while the Bitcoin and crypto story has reached this early adopter stage, the Web3 internet story is still very much in its first innings. It's where Web1 was in the early 90s. So we are very, very early. The Web3 version as we know it has existed for less than 10 years with Ethereum in 2014, and we are now in 2022. That's less than 10 years versus the internet that took 30 years to get to 5 billion users. So extremely early. The next couple of slides talk about how institutions have gotten involved with Web3. And this has really spiked over the last 5 years. Who's investing in Web3? In addition to asset managers, of course, most major VC funds that are traditional VC funds, whether it's A16Z, Sequoia, Tiger, et cetera, have actively invested in Web3. And then, in parallel, pure play crypto VC funds or Web3 VC funds have gotten massive. So companies like Multicoin, Paradigm, Polychain, Pantera, et cetera, are all investing in Web3. Let's take a look at Web3 adoption by traditional finance. I look at this in 4 buckets. One bucket is wealth management. Most of the major banks, whether it's Morgan Stanley, Goldman, Citi, et cetera, offer crypto now to their wealth management clients. And a lot of this is by demand being pulled by their clients. Custody services. Custody is becoming a huge area that's unsolved for in the crypto world, particularly because treasuries, especially for DAOs, et cetera, are becoming massive enough that they require management and custody. Most of the same companies you see on the wealth management side are starting to offer those custody services for Web3. Trading. Interesting to note here is that this is a global phenomena. You have trading desks at all the major banks, whether it's BNP Paribas, that's a European bank, or American banks. Entire countries are experimenting with crypto as legal tender, and these are definitely experiments at the moment, with El Salvador as the first one in 2021, and then the Central African Republic accepting Bitcoin as tender in 2022. A lot has to be figured out with these experiments with respect to monetary and fiscal policy, but I expect in 2023, there will be at least one, if not more, countries that accept Bitcoin as legal tender. Even outside of financial services, a lot of industries are jumping into Web3 and crypto. First, there are companies that are starting to hold Bitcoin in their treasury for treasury management. This includes not just companies like Marathon, which is a pure play Web3 company, it's a mining company, but also companies like Tesla, Square, et cetera. Several brands are jumping into Web3, whether it's through the metaverse or branding or marketing or retail, and innovation labs, and that's companies that are in retail, media and entertainment, tech, publishing, et cetera. Payments. The top 3 card issuers and all major payments companies now are accepting crypto. And last but not least, a lot of crypto-first companies, Web3 companies, are going public via IPOs. Coinbase was one of the first ones to do that, and it was funded by A16Z as well as Union Square Ventures, but there are others that are lining up to go public as well. So this is a very busy slide, but I wanted to highlight the DAO landscape. Even though the experiments in this space are still at a small scale, they are growing exponentially. You have decentralized autonomous organizations today for very specific purposes. So investment DAOs, as an example, are essentially VC funds or investment funds, but they are decentralized in terms of how they're operated. A lot of the protocol DAOs there are DeFi companies, so whether it's Maker, Uniswap, et cetera, they're organized as decentralized autonomous organizations. So where does Indonesia fall on the map here? This was something that I looked into specifically for this talk, and what is interesting is that in 2021, there was a survey that was done, I believe it was by Gemini, where they surveyed 20 countries. And of the 20 countries, cryptocurrency ownership was highest in Indonesia. And the reason for this, similar to India, was because a lot of the users felt that crypto was a hedge against inflation. But even countries like Singapore that have a more stable fiat currency, even there, the users cited that the reason that they were using crypto was as an inflation hedge. But what's more interesting and what's more surprising for me was the graph at the bottom of the page. Of the 20 countries that were surveyed, Indonesia and Israel were the only 2 countries where amongst the crypto users, there were actually more women than men. So 50% of the crypto users in Indonesia and Israel were women, and 49% were men. I'm still trying to figure out why that is, and I would love to have conversations about your thoughts on this. But that's amazing, and it's fascinating for me personally, and it just goes to the point that accessibility and inclusion are working. This is another slide, and I know the graphics are fuzzy, but this is also very encouraging because this is a study done by Chainalysis, which is one of the most credible data and research companies in the Web3 space. Now, they surveyed almost 150 countries. Of 150 countries, Indonesia ranked 20th on grassroots adoption of crypto. And the way the survey and the study was done, the research was done, was to define grassroots adoption based on not just absolute use of crypto, but also indexing it and weighting it by things like purchasing power parity, internet usage. So it was in relation to overall wealth. The other piece is they looked at not just institutional adoption, but also retail adoption to see what grassroots adoption looked like. And Indonesia ranked 20th on this. All right, so Web3 is not without its challenges. There are several challenges that Web3 still faces to achieve mass adoption, but I will highlight again that we are very early in the journey, less than 10 years in. Efficiency is one of them. For the last several years, there's been a lot of conversation about all the power consumed by crypto and running and operating these blockchains. The Ethereum proof of stake merge that happened recently has cut down power consumption by 99.9%. So we are getting there, but it's still not the most efficient operation. The UX UI, the user interface of crypto and being able to use Web3 applications is terrible currently. Accessibility is obviously still an issue. In order to participate in Web3, you need to have access to the internet. Scalability and transactions per second, it's getting much better, it's exponentially better, but it's still not there yet. Hacks. Security breaches, hacks, these are things that are always top of the news. Every time you open, look at news, that's what's happening still, and it needs to be fixed. Education. Regulation is another one that's a big concern because while it's moving fast, the developments and experimentation in crypto and Web3 is moving faster. Once we have regulation that is consistent across various geographies, various jurisdictions globally, and that's clear, that's actually going to be a huge boost for the Web3 space. And last but not least, developing in the Web3 world is not easy. It's very clunky. There are new languages involved like Solidity, Rust, etc. So that's a challenge. I am, however, still extremely bullish on Web3 from a tech perspective, and there are several tailwinds that are causing this enthusiasm on my side. Number one, the tech stack is much better than it was 10 years ago. Number two, institutions are starting to embrace crypto and Web3 in a one-way street. They're not going to turn back. Number three, regulation is starting to get clarified and also consistent across geographies. And the last one is, there is a tremendous amount of amazing top talent across multiple industries, whether it's accountants, lawyers, healthcare professionals, financial services professionals that are jumping into Web3. Very quickly, the four themes that I'm most excited about as an investor in this space in the short to medium term are, number one, there will be a lot of models that start looking at how we can use this peer-to-peer exchange of value, which has been enabled for the first time on the internet, to create new business models, whether that is code to earn, learn to earn, etc. Number two, artificial intelligence and machine learning are going to mature, and the metaverse is going to start getting better integrated. NFTs will move past their speculation. They will move past art and music and start being integrated a lot more with real-world assets. NFTs will also become a gateway to Web3 similar to wallets. Wallets and NFTs, in my mind, will be crucial with respect to Web3. And then last, the complexity of coding on Web3 will be abstracted, and there will be low-code applications, and being able to build on Web3 will become easier. This is my last slide. How can each one of you get involved? First and foremost, I would say learn by doing yourself and see how things work by opening a wallet. It's very simple. You don't have to use a ton of cryptocurrencies to do that. There are several Web3 communities that are extremely passionate about this space, and they are in every geography. There are several meetups that you can join and attend events like these and conferences, etc. You could join a decentralized autonomous organization or use a Web3 app. For developers out there, I would say it's always a plus to learn a new language, whether it's Solidity or Rust, and to diversify your skill sets and build on Web3. And for investors, of course, a great way to get involved is to work with a startup that is building on Web3, get close to the product, get close to the strategy. That's a great way of getting involved as well. You will note that I did not say here that one way to get involved is to trade cryptocurrencies. So with that, I will leave you with at least having a slightly better understanding of the vision of Web3, and hopefully you can see that it goes far beyond crypto or even the blockchain technology, and hopefully this leaves you excited for the future that's going to be built on Web3. And with that, thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you very much, Akshi.
That's right.
Beli.
Gratis ongkir. Beli.
Gratis ongkir. Download Beli sekarang.
That's right.
Beli tepat waktu. Beli
Tepat waktu. Download Beli sekarang. That's right.
Beli pasti ori. Beli
Pasti ori. Download Beli sekarang. Pasti puas, pasti Beli.